My wife, Caitlin, and I have been married for nearly 10 years now. We met each other in college and shared a few classes together. She was the outgoing social butterfly, and I was the quiet academic who mostly kept to himself. We had both been assigned to a group project in one of our mutual classes, and from the moment that my wife first introduced herself to me, she made it her goal to bring me out of my introverted shell. Which, to her credit, she did. I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I had never met her. She's the only person I've ever met that can win someone over with her smile and laughter alone. She makes me a better person, and I feel so blessed to be able to spend my life with her. But lately, she hasn't been acting like her usual self. Her stunning green eyes have lost their usual luster. I seem to catch her frequently staring off into space, like she's lost in thought. The spring in her step has been replaced with a dull, lethargic amble. It breaks my heart to say, but she seems to be a shell of the vibrant woman that I married. This change was sudden and unexpected. One day she was perfectly fine, and the next, it was like she had the life and joy sucked out of her completely. It feels like a chore just to get her to respond to me when we sit down to eat together. She hardly touches her food, and just listlessly pushes it around her plate with her utensils. She was already a petite woman, but in the past few weeks alone, she lost enough weight for me to see the sharp outline of her ribs and collarbone underneath her now baggy clothing. I frequently ask her if something is wrong, or if there's something bothering her, to which she will simply shake her head and give me a brief, dismissive statement, telling me not to worry about it or that she's just got a lot on her mind. I rack my brain trying to remember if I've said something or done something to upset her, but I come up empty-handed every single time. My wife and I rarely spend any time apart, and we tell each other everything. So, if something would have happened to her to make her act this way, I would have either seen it with my own eyes, or she would have already told me about it. We both trust each other unconditionally, and as long as we've known each other, we've never kept secrets from one another. Besides, my wife has never been the type to keep secrets anyway. She's always been an open book to anyone who would listen, and an open ear for anyone who wants to speak. She would often tell me that she didn't believe in keeping secrets because she never had anything to hide. In my experience, she's been the most trustworthy and honest person that I've ever met. It seems so out of character for this sudden shift to vague answers and constant introspection. Now, this might sound a little bit crazy, but I truly am at wit's end trying to figure out what's going on with Katie, and this has been the only reoccurring event that I can pinpoint. About a month ago, my wife bought one of those old-fashioned bedside radio alarm clocks to put on her side of the bed. She's always had a hard time getting out of bed in the mornings when she would set her alarm on her phone, but she said there was something about the nostalgia of hearing an FM radio click on in the morning that would wake her up every single time without fail. Katie has always had her quirks, so this was nothing too out of the ordinary for her. I myself am an extremely heavy sleeper, so I've relied fully on either 14 consecutive alarms on my cell phone, or Katie waking me up by shaking me around for as long as I can remember. That's how I first noticed that something was a little off. The day after Katie got her radio clock was a day that I had off from work, so I didn't bother setting my alarm. I figured that when the time came that I needed to wake up, she would just shake me and tell me to get up herself. But that time never came, and when I eventually woke myself up and checked the time on my phone, I realized that it was nearly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. In a half-asleep daze, I reached over to my nightstand and grabbed my glasses, half-heartedly wondering why my wife had let me sleep in so late. I figured that maybe she had a full day of errands that she wanted to get an early start on, and decided to let me get some luxurious beauty sleep. But that thought quickly vanished when I rolled over to see her still lying in bed next to me. I was taken aback a bit, as Katie is not the type to sleep well into the afternoon. The only time in our entire relationship that I've ever seen her sleep past 11 was when she had gotten the flu a few years back, so this was definitely out of the ordinary for her. I quietly called her name, checking to see if she was awake or if maybe she was just lying on her side browsing on her phone or something, but I got no response. Finally, I decided to wake her up myself by leaning over and giving her a kiss on the cheek. To my surprise, her eyes were wide open, and she was just staring off in the direction of her nightstand. Startled, I called her by her name. This time, she turned to look at me, offering me just a soft grunt of acknowledgement before swinging her feet off the bed and walking to the bathroom. After that, we went into the kitchen as we normally would, and I asked her if something was bothering her. She furrowed her brows, staring at me as if trying to find the right words to say in that moment. She then shook her head and just softly asked if her alarm clock had disturbed me during the night. I told her that no, I hadn't heard anything, but even if I had, it probably wouldn't have woken me up, and assured her not to worry about it. She pursed her lips and shook her head again before mumbling under her breath, asking if I could hear it now. I laughed, thinking that maybe she was playing some sort of trick on me, but after her expression remained the same, I realized that she was serious. I told her that I couldn't hear anything, aside from the sound of the refrigerator running and the neighbors mowing their front lawn, but other than that, nothing. I thought that maybe she might have been referring to the high-pitched whine that old electronics sometimes make, sounds that not every person can hear. She suddenly got very defensive and told me that I wasn't taking her seriously. We didn't speak of it again that day. But the next day, I woke up to my own alarm in the morning to find her once again, lying wide awake and staring at the radio clock. I asked her if she was okay, but I got no response. In fact, this time, she was so focused on the clock itself that she didn't even blink when I got out of bed and walked around to her side. I looked down at the clock and noticed that the alarm button was still depressed. I punched the snooze button and Katie immediately snapped out of her trance-like state and sat up in bed to look at me. I carefully asked her if everything was okay, but once again she just brushed me off and went straight into the bathroom to brush her teeth and start the day. As this routine continued, she started to become more and more agitated every time I wouldn't acknowledge the sound coming from her radio clock. I genuinely could not hear anything, and began to wonder if maybe these were the beginning signs of latent mental illness, or maybe the side effects of a new medication that my wife hadn't told me about. I offered to take her to the doctor to make sure everything was okay, but this only angered her and drove the space between us even further. A week or so into this behavior, I began to notice her mouthing words to herself silently before I would press the snooze button on the clock, as well as most of the times I would catch her just staring off into space. I'm not a skilled lip reader by any means, but eventually, after watching her repeat the same silent phrases over and over, I was able to make out the words safe, sleep, between, and knocking. Everything else she would either mumble so quickly that I couldn't make out the words, or were being mouthed in some kind of language that I've never heard or didn't understand. Eventually, she lost her resistance and agitation and became more docile and, for lack of a better word, catatonic. She stopped putting up a fight, and I ended up taking her to the doctor for an examination. After some extensive testing, the doctors and specialists could not give me a reason or an answer for this bizarre behavior, aside from some previously undiagnosed schizophrenia or psychosis. But I know my wife better than I know anyone, and that answer just didn't sit right with me. Frustrated and desperate for answers, the other night while Katie was sleeping, I unplugged the radio that seemed to be the source of all these bizarre changes. I tossed it in the dumpster beside the garage and crawled back in bed beside her. The next morning when I woke up, Katie was not lying next to me, but was instead standing at the bedroom window, staring out into the morning fog. Still, she was mouthing words to herself that I could not hear or understand. Finally, at the end of my rope and genuinely terrified for her well-being, I grabbed her by the arm and demanded that she tell me what was wrong. I could feel her entire body trembling, and with tears in her eyes, she turned to me and shook her head in disbelief and terror. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "That sound was the only thing keeping them away." I took a step back, letting go of her arm and looking for the right words to say to her, when suddenly I heard a soft knock on the front door.